Hello everyone and welcome to the 4.0 Infiltration Shadow Overview. We're going to take a look at this spec. It's pretty badass in this expansion actually. I haven't played this since vanilla, to be honest with you, where it was very slow and it was very proc based, and the procs were pretty shitty. However, it has had massive improvements, particularly in 4.0. I never played it throughout. I played it briefly in 3.0. I think I did it a couple of fights with it in a raid once just to try it out, but I never really stuck with it in 4.0. Really good actually. A lot of people saying that this is the preferred spec now with the nerfs that they've done to Serenity. What they've done to Serenity. Serenity's fucking horrible. They just ruined that in Shadow of Revan. So this is the spec that we're going with now. And is it viable? Yes, pretty viable these days for raiding. A lot of people said it was never really a raiding spec, but now there's more a PvP spec. But I'm glad to see it come back. So what do we get that is new in this spec? Level 64. We get Fracturing Force, increases damage dealt by Shadow Technique's Force Breach by 5%. Additionally, activating Shadow Stride while Shadow Technique is active builds 3 Breaching Shadows. A very good ability. Shadow Stride is our new ability. Okay, it basically takes you to the target. It's a gap closer. What it does is it grants you 3 stacks of Force Breach. Okay. You can see here, Breaching Shadows, okay, increases the damage dealt by Force Breach, okay. So your shadow spec is basically, the goal of the spec is basically building 3 stacks of Force Breach and then getting Force Breach to hit as hard as possible. That is the goal for this spec, so having this is very handy. A level 64 ability, it's actually good. Actually changes the way we play the class, and you know, we build our whole rotation around Shadow Stride now, okay, and getting this uptime, okay, this along with Force Potency, okay. Force Potency builds 3 Breaching Shadows as well, okay, bear that in mind, okay. Potent Shadows, exiting combat reduces the active cooldown of Force Potency by 60 seconds as well, okay. And the critical damage dealt by Shadow Strike is increased by 30%. Okay, Shadow Strike, very important. As you can see, crit plays a big role in this spec. We also have Deep Impact as well at level 60. It increases the critical strike damage dealt by your Shadow Technique's Force Breach effect and Psychokinetic Blast by 30%. Now some people say I shit on Alacrity a lot. We're shitting on Alacrity for the spec. Look at the amount of crit that we get, the amount of critical damage bonus. Therefore, crit is a very important stat. Okay, Psychokinetic Blast, it replaces our project essentially. Okay, it does the same thing basically. It does more damage. It's just basically a replacement for our project. It acts the same way. There are certain things we can do to proc it. Also, we do get Clairvoyant Strike, which is a replacement for Double Strike. Places Double Strike. It's just fairly similar to Double Strike. It does grant us stacks of our Psychokinetic Blast, cost less force, and we also get Clairvoyant. Okay, have a chance to automatically trigger Shadow Technique. Okay, so if you look at the force cost of Psychokinetic Blast, it costs, take everything away, it costs 32 force, which is it's a third of our force essentially. We'll call it 33%, it's close enough. A third of our force. However, when we pop 2 of these off, it will cost 16 force. Okay, so it costs half the amount of force. Really important for this because this is quite force sensitive. We only want to hit Psychokinetic Blast off whenever it's procced, okay? Whenever we proc it as well. We'll take that Breaching Shadow stack away. Also, we also get a proc on Shadow Strike. Again, Shadow Strike, Infiltration Tactics, direct damage attacks, grant Infiltration Tactics, causing your next Shadow Strike deal 20% more damage and consume 75% less force. Okay, significant there, 75%, cost 40 force. Okay, that's almost half our force. Here, we don't have 110 force anymore. We used to get 110, so if you can see here, we'll try and get it to proc. It now costs 10 force, okay, as opposed to 40. And it'll do, 20 other things evaded, it'll do 40% more damage as well, which you can see there. Just handy. So also we have our force synergy, which again, if you get a critical strike with a force attack, it increases your melee crit. Now we'll talk about the utilities, and then we'll go into we'll go into a gearing, should we say, and stats. We also have upheaval as well built into the spec. Our project and psychokinetic blast are 50% to attack the target twice. Second attack does half the damage. It procs when it procs. It's not really something we can have any control over, which is quite annoying. It's just a multi-strike chance. So the skillful tier, the mandatory one, Shadowy Veil, okay, increases the armor rating by 30%, while Force Technique or Shadow Technique is active. We have Shadow Technique in this spec. It's Shadow or Combat Technique. We don't use Combat Technique. It is the tanking one. So again, it increases the armor rating by 30%. That's all you really have to know in that one. The other one's the tank spec, which affects your guard. If we're cleaving, then Lambast, Whirling Blow, 25%. Bear in mind our only AoE ability in this entire spec is Whirling Blow. It also procs our Psychokinetic Blast as well, which is quite nice. Costs less force, has an increased chance to crit as well. So again, giving it a 25% damage boost. If there's any cleave in the fight, we're taking it. Okay, so I'm taking this for questing. Clarity is a nice one as well. Reduces the cooldown of Mind Snap by 2 seconds. Mind Snap is your interrupt. Okay, so fights like Draxus, Jargon Sorno, fights where things need to be interrupted. Okay, there's a few fights. If you're doing the gold, team on, what's it called again? Oasis City Infiltration in Scum and Villainy, you need that. Again, you need to interrupt that healer, so reducing the cooldown of that. Also, if you're getting stunned, Force of Will and getting to use Force Speed more is decent. We don't generally use Shadow Stride as a gap closer. We tend to stick with Force Speed as our gap closer, because Shadow Stride procs Force Breach. We tend to want to keep that for Force Breach, really. So Force Speed, reducing the cooldown, again, it's very, very useful. Misdirection is okay. We are going to be slipping into stealth in combat, so having our, our movement speed increased to stealth, just in case we slip into stealth. We are going to be using Cloak as part of this rotation. It is going to be part of our class abilities, so we are going to want the extra movement speed. Is always nice. The new ability, Double Strike, Clairvoyant Strike, Whirling Blows, slow the target, the damage by 30% for 6 seconds. Not useful in PvE. Force Wake, not really in PvE. Mental Defense, if we are getting stunned, if we're doing the Annihilation Droid where we get stunned and kicked away, maybe reduce all damage taken while stunned by 30%. If we're getting reliably stunned, then yes, I would go with that. Pinning Resolve reduces the cooldown of Force Stun by 10 seconds. In addition, Force Lift affects 2 targets that are standard and weak enemies within 8 meters of the target. If you're doing a lot of CC, hard mode flashpoints, this could be useful. Force Stun is more useful in PvP, really, essentially, but if you're doing a lot of crowd control, the spec does have a decent amount of crowd control as well. Masterful, there are only 2 choices here. These 2 are mandatory. Fade is mandatory. Again, we are going to be using stealth here. Reduce the cooldown of Blackout by 15 seconds and Force Cloak by 30 seconds. Now, in this spec, okay, we have Masked Assault. Okay, exiting stealth finishes the cooldown on Blackout, and Blackout can be used out of stealth. Okay, it grants us 6 seconds of Shadow's Respite, which is here, which again it restores 15 force. So Shadow's Respite increases our force regeneration by 50%, so we're going to want to use Blackout certainly generally to do that. Also increases damage reduction by 25%, so it's a useful defensive cooldown as well. We are going to use it in an offensive sense though. We're not sorry, I'm ill right now. I'm so ill doing this. Blackout we are going to use in an offensive capacity, so it gives us essentially both of these. Blackout on a 45-second cooldown as opposed to a 1-minute cooldown, and Force Cloak on a 90-second cooldown as opposed to a 2-minute cooldown. Now, minute and a half cooldown for that. So we get more of these out, and bear in mind that Force regeneration will be increased by 50%. Okay. So we're going to go into stealth mode when we get low on Force, because it is quite demanding on Force. But we do have the things to deal with this. Now, we should point out that we should always use Blackout before Force Cloak. Okay, we use Blackout and then Force Cloak, because Force Cloak finishes the cooldown on Blackout. So we don't want to waste that Blackout. And we get 2 Blackouts in for Force Cloak when Blackout is on cooldown, so don't waste that. Of course, the other one is Force Harmonics. Okay, the cooldown of Force Wave is irrelevant, but getting 1 extra charge of Force Potency. Okay, when we cover gearing, this will become apparent. Force Potency is one of our best DPS cooldowns in this, and our whole rotation is going to revolve around Force Potency windows. Basically, we're going to maximize Force Potency. That is the goal of this as well. So having the extra charge gives us 3 auto crits essentially, because we're going to talk about gearing in a second. 3 auto crits as opposed to 2. Again, 30% more damage from abilities that crit, and it's only Force abilities, but you know, 2 of the Force abilities will be auto critting, so again, it's a big DPS increase. It's a shame we can't take Mind Over Matter, but these 2 are just so good offensively. Again, increasing the duration of resilience by 2 seconds. We could argue the new ability is Activating Project, Psychokinetic Blast, Mind Crush, Vanquish, increases our movement speed by 50%. Nah, we don't really care about that, to be honest. These 2 are the only choice in this spec. Okay, there's no real choice here. It's a bit of a shame that none of these really benefit from it, but these 2 really do nicely from that. In heroic section, Shadow Shelter is the one to go to for raiding. Our Shadow Shelter has been completely redesigned in this expansion. It no longer provides a buff to the healers. What it is, it's kind of like a Sonic Rebounder type thing for the Shadow now. It acts like that, and it acts like the, I can't remember, it's the Guardian protection thing as well, I can't remember what it's called. Mass Mind Control provides Shadow Shelter to all allies within range, excluding yourself, so it reduces the damage they take by 5% for the next 6 seconds and heals them for 1900 health over the duration. The heal is kind of crappy, but the 5% less damage is quite nice. If you think of it on fights like Garge, where if you have other melee DPS, what you can do is coordinate this with, say, a Vanguard, for example. What you do is, on the first pounce, either you hit your Mass Mind Control, your AoE taunt, and run out for a pounce and let the Vanguard stay in and have the 5% damage reduction, and then on the next pounce what you can do is you can talk about hard mode Guard here. On the next pounce what you can do is the Vanguard can then use Sonic Rebounder on you. They can use Sonic Round and get Sonic Rebounder on you, and then they can get out and avoid the pounce damage as well. So you can alternate that if you have 2 melee DPS, a Shadow and a Vanguard. Synergizes nicely. Again, the heal is not really anything to write home about, but the 5% damage reduction is always welcome. Someone who mained the healer, we'd always welcome 5% damage reduction. No longer gives you 5% healing received. No longer really benefits you, but again, if you're doing hard mode raiding, there are times you want to benefit. It is very useful again on the Annihilation droid as well when he's doing his missiles. His lots of missiles attack. Again, the heal, you could argue, might come in handy there. It's going to bolster the healers. 5% less damage is more of a boost to healers than the crappy heal. Heal you for about a couple of percent of your health. Cloak of Resilience I like. Activating Force Cloak. Again, we are going to be using it. We're going to be using this a lot in this spec. Grants us 2 seconds of Resilience. So again, Resilience is our big defensive cooldown. Increases purges all hostile effects, increases our chance to resist force and tech attacks by 200% for 3 seconds. Think Sword Squadron grenades. mean nothing to us in resilience when we have resilience. So it is, you know, a 1 minute cooldown, so it is reasonably useful actually. Resilience, very very good. It is our oh shit button if we're standing in shit that we shouldn't. Only tech or force attacks, though. Melee attacks it will not work on. I'm gonna take that willpower stim off of there. Don't have willpower stims anymore. Off of there just briefly. So when it comes to gearing, this is a spec that benefits from crit. Now the goal is of course 110 accuracy, #1 goal. The secondary goal is to get 40% crit. Okay, 40% critical chance. And the reason for this is that force potency increases your critical chance for your direct force attacks by 60%. So if you have 40% base crit and you get a 60% boost, that's a 100% force crit chance. Okay, not melee. It's not going to work for melee. It gives you a force crit chance. Okay, very very important that we know that. We are short, 7% short. I'm not that well geared. Look at the set bonus I have. You'll notice it's the Vanguard set bonus. It's good gear. I mean, look at it. It's 220 set bonus gear. You know, 220, 216 set bonus gear. We do have an alacrity mod in there. Alacrity, it's not a priority. When I say alacrity, when we begin gearing, crit is our second. Alacrity is our lowest priority of the three. Accuracy at #1, crit at #2. Crit multiplier will come along with crit. Okay, for taking crit rating. So you want to get, what I'm planning on doing with this spec, I've got the plan if I ever decide to gear it. What I plan on doing is upgrading these two. Okay, so I need 200 glowing crystals. Upgrade these two accuracy things to 220 comm gear, and then put an augment in one of them, and I'm going to drop accuracy from the main hand and put another crit enhancement in there, and obviously get 216 main hand, and go with a crit enhancement and upgrade this one for more crit. As you can see here, it is a resurrected piece, so it's quite an old piece, still a tier piece nonetheless, so it's kind of decent. Low priority in terms of replacing. We've got like 216, ignore the set bonus. Now the set bonus for the shadow is quite useful. Again, it adds another auto crit. 4 auto crits we get in this. See why we love crit so much in this spec? 4 auto crits. Okay, it turns your spinning strike into an auto crit. Okay, every 1 minute. Okay, the 4-piece is also very useful for the shadow. Okay, the 4-piece reduces the cooldown of force potency by 15 seconds. Very very useful. Again, also entering stealth reduces the cooldown of force potency. So we are going to be using stealth. We are going to be using a lot of stealth in this. We are going to be using stealth. So your rotation, what is the priority? Again, the simple priority is 3 stacks of force breach and get force breach to hit as hard as possible. Now demonstrating this might be difficult because we don't have 40% crit. Let's assume we do have 40% crit. We have 33. We're 7% short. Again, I need to get a offhand here. That'll improve the crit. And what we're going to do, that augment is, that's an old augment in there. That's a level 52 augment. That's an old, I think I pulled that out of a cargo hold. I think I pulled an old one of them out. I think it had 180 gear in it actually. But yeah, I pulled that Grey Helix Focus out and just slapped some 216 stuff in it on my Vanguard relics. You know, we don't have very good relics. That one isn't even augmented. It shows you how little we played our shadow. I actually played it very little in DPS spec, more of a tank spec we played this in. But I did put the Vanguard gear on because this has got 233 crit in it. So it's like, fuck yeah, we want that. We want that. 231 power, 233 crit. That's a 220 set bonus piece. You know, it's good gear. You know, the stats are pretty good. The set bonus is useless. Pretty much useless. The 4-piece is the most useful. 4-piece and the 6-piece. 2-piece is alright, I suppose. 2% damage increase. We'll take it. Better than nothing, I guess. But certainly our goal here is start out in stealth, because again we get Shadow's Respite, force regeneration increased. When we come out of stealth, we are gonna get this for 6 seconds. So 6 seconds at 50% force regen is what we're gonna get. Now, one of the things we do not want to do is we do not want to open with Shadow Stride. Okay, we do not want to use that as our opener. Okay, what we want to do is open with potency. Okay, we're going to pop potency, force breach, shadow stride, force breach. Okay, bear in mind we're getting 3. If we have 40% crit, I should point out, we are going to get 3 auto crits. Okay, we're going to get 3 auto crits. I should mention that it's actually shadow strike. It turns into a crit as well. Should point out your 6p set bonus. I forgot to mention that. Your clairvoyant strike will turn shadow strike or spinning strike. So basically, when you're outside of the execute phase, shadow strike is your auto crit. Forgot to mention that. Make sure you line it up with the proc though as well. Make sure you line it up with infiltration tactics for 20% more damage. Do 50% more damage on top of your surge rating as well. So it does do a lot of damage, this, with the 6p set. Should be your priority to get the 6p set. Again, I'm not going to raid with this one, so I'm using the Vanguard one, which is no benefit, but it's just good gear. It's just got good mods and enhancements in it. That's the only real reason. So it is a benefit to us outside of a raiding environment. So it is a decent benefit to us. Obviously, we have to have a different main hand and offhand. 208, not great. So I'm going to pull the mod, the accuracy out of that, and we'll get them. And we'll get an augment for accuracy in there. The goal with this for augmenting is to augment crit until 40 and then go power. Okay, we're going to go power augs after that. Hit 40%, power augs. Because again, it's, you can have 1 alacrity piece, and I've got 1 alacrity aug in there. 2 alacrity augs, in fact. There, it gives me 3.27. I don't see the point in stacking massive amounts of alacrity when you do have the Shadow's Respite buff. Okay, I just don't think it's a huge benefit to the spec. We want to hit hard. Okay, we want to hit hard in this spec, and augmenting for power makes all our abilities hit harder. Augmenting for crit makes our burst window hit harder. Okay, our burst window will hit harder for power, but 40% crit is very important. Crit multiplier, we don't really have a target for that. Critical rating has to be 40%. Okay, we don't want to chase that. We don't really want to go too far beyond 40%. Okay, we can start, if you find yourself getting far beyond it, you could maybe look into alacrity, but it is the lowest priority. Force regen's 12.4 per second. That is going to get an increase by 50% as well. So it's going to go up to what, 18 force per second. It is 12. In fact, it is 12, and when we come out of that, we'll take that off. 12 is the double buff, isn't it? Yeah, 8.3. Yeah. Okay, so it's not going to get doubled. It is getting doubled, so that's reasonable. 12 per second is reasonable. That is with the Shadow's Respite buff, we should point out. Again, alacrity will help with this, but we've got things like blackout and cloak, and you know, things like that. So what we're going to do is we want to open up force potency, shadow strike, shadow stride, and get in, and then we want to hit this off. This will become auto crit, the 6p set. Fire off that. Bear in mind it will do an auto crit, and of course we've got our final stack that we can use on Psychokinetic Blast, which didn't crit there, weirdly. So then the goal is to get 2 of these off, 2 auto crit breaches, then an auto crit Psychokinetic Blast. We are going to use Clairvoyant Strike second, so we're going to use breach, shadow stride. It's potency, breach, shadow stride, breach, essentially. So 2 auto crit breaches, a clairvoyant strike. We're going to hit the shadow strike. It does put a sunder debuff up on the target shadow strike, but we don't really want to open with it because it hurts our force regen. It hurts it. It costs 40 force. It's a lot of force, really, so it's not practical. So we do this, we go like this, then we go this, and then we go this again, and then we get behind the target, and we shadow strike, we can hit that, and then we hit the auto crit Psychokinetic Blast. And then what we're going to do is just fill in with clairvoyant strikes. Whenever this procs, we're going to use shadow strike. Our top priority is always force breach, then shadow strike, and then Psychokinetic Blast tends to be. So it operates on a priority system. Because we can get good crits with this, just keep this on. You generally just keep hitting clairvoyant strike. Try that again. Exiting combat does finish the cooldown of potency, which is quite nice. We'll take that away from there. The situation we want to avoid is going in potency. You see, we just wasted. You can see what we've done. If we shadow stride in and then pop potency, we've wasted a force breach. You just wasted an auto crit force breach. Okay, that's the biggest situation that we want to avoid. Okay, massive avoid that situation at all costs. Really, we'll pop that off there. So we want to try and avoid that situation. That's why we don't use it as a gap closer. Now, the most important thing here is to get your Shadow Stride lining up with Force Potency. Okay, we do use it on cooldown. We are going to track its cooldown. Okay, we keep a track of it. We keep a track of Psychokinetic Blast cooldown. Obviously, we can pop Combat Readiness when we go into our melee rotation. So what you're going to do is Potency, Psychokinetic Blast, in you go, double auto crit. We go into our melee rotation. Obviously we hit that in the wrong order there, doesn't matter. And then we're going to hit this, and then we're just hitting this and just keeping track of this. Again, get another one out, Psychokinetic Blast. Bear in mind, always use Breach before Psychokinetic Blast, okay? But there you go, we get our free crit, force synergy, melee critical chance gets increased, which is nice. So that's why we don't really want to go beyond the 40%. So the goal is just to keep Clairvoyant Slash. If we get low on force, we are going to pop Blackout. You can pop Blackout fairly quickly into your rotation if you get low on force. So don't worry about your force management initially. Pop Blackout and then hit a couple of Saber Strikes. Get your Clairvoyant Strike. Always be using Psychokinetic Blast on cooldown. Now we don't really use low slash in our rotation. Okay, low slash is keybound because it's useful for questing. Because if we end up tanking the mob, we can just low slash it and go in and hit our Shadow Strike. But Shadow Strike does a nice amount of damage here. Shadow Strike is very, very nice. We hit our Force Cloak generally when this is about halfway through its cooldown. Hit your Force Cloak after you've hit your Blackout, and we're kind of have a bit of downtime because again, Force Cloak, you'll see here, come out of stealth. I didn't finish the cooldown on Potency. Said it finished the cooldown on. Must have read that wrong. Shadow Technique is active. Shadow Technique restores 9 force. Weird. Yep, Shadow Strike sunders the target. Must have read that wrong. Oh, it's Blackout, isn't it? That gives you the cooldown of, isn't it? So bear in mind that we always want to get Blackout out first before we do the cooldown of that. And bear in mind, if Potency is about to come off cooldown, then save your Shadow Strike, because again, we do not want to use Shadow Stride, should we say? I keep getting Shadow Strike and Shadow Stride mixed up. Shadow Stride we do not want to use and then have Potency available, because that's the key to this spec, is getting these 2 auto crit force breaches. The problem with the spec before was it very rarely proc. The speed of the spec is pretty nice, and it can do some pretty nice things as well. DPS wise, is it ahead of a Vanguard? I'd say so. I'd say it's quite nicely ahead. We've got a 2-minute cooldown for our big crit cooldown, and theirs is a 1.5 and goes down to a 1:15. So they can have every minute and 15 seconds with the set bonus. You can have the auto crit, 3 auto crit abilities, and the 4th one with Shadow Strike as well every minute. So many auto crits here. So many auto crits. It will proc every minute. Bear that in mind. So as a DPS spec, it's pretty nice actually. It is a pretty nice spec. If you get into force trouble, we got Blackout, we got our Cloak as well. I will say Spinning Kick doesn't really get a look in PvE. We're looking at Spinning Kick. Spinning Kick usable from stealth only. It does proc our Shadow Strike, but in PvP, yeah, it's your opener. It's going to be your opener in PvP. In a PvE environment, not really. We're not going to stun anything. getting these auto crits is more important than getting the spinning kick out. Okay, just getting that out. And of course our clairvoyant strike is what makes this an auto crit. So we've always got the chance to make this, but spinning strike, we could open with it if we wanted. We could open spinning strike, potency, force breach, shadow stride, force breach, but I mean it tends never really to get a look in. We have to be behind the target, we have to be in stealth. Bear in mind this is a 10-meter range, and we are going to close the gap after we exit stealth generally, so we can be a few meters away when we start. Potency, we can pop well in stealth. On the countdown, 3, 2, 1, potency. 3, 2, potency. Go potency on 2, and 1 you need to be within 10 meters, and you're going to be firing off your breach, and then you can shadow stride up to the target and get a second auto crit breach off. Other than that, it's pretty good spec. Pretty good spec. Again, never press breach with less than 3 stacks. Never press shadow strike when it's not procced, and never press psychokinetic blast when it's not procced, and you should be fine for force management. You can fill in with saber strike. Bear in mind it does restore a bit of force, your saber strike as well, so you can always fill in with that. Blackout, again, we can use that. Mass mind control is very nice defensive ability. You can still teleport if you need to be in a certain area, like Titan 6 is a good example. Drop your teleport behind the rock. Seems to have crashed there. Drop your teleport behind the rock. Oh, he's done number 5 defensive, whatever it is, number 5. Oh, we're behind the rock now. There you go. So pretty useful actually, your teleport. Sages get it as well these days, so they can teleport to a rock as well. Just make sure you're not teleporting to the same rock if you're doing hard or nightmare. Just make sure that doesn't go down. So anyway, that is all for this video. Next video we'll take a look at Serenity. Oh god, poor old Serenity. It's a sad spec, sad state of the spec. I like this spec. I have to say I like it. I love the changes. It used to be really slow. We used to be sitting there with like shock. We used to use, or project it was. I never played a shadow. I played a assassin. Sitting there just waiting forever for this to proc. It's like, come on. Come on. Now we've got all these things that automatically proc it. And it is quite a nice spec actually. It is quite good for damage. Pretty viable in a raid environment. So anyway, that is all for this video. Thank you for joining me, and we'll see you again soon, and goodbye.